The dawn over Tenochtitlan was unlike any other. The sky, usually painted in warm gold and crimson, churned with a dark veil of smoke rising from the eastern horizon. The priests whispered that the gods had opened their mouths in anger, for the wind carried the scent of blood before the day had even begun. Atop the great temple, High Priest Tlacaelel stood with arms raised, his feathered headdress glittering with jade and quetzal plumes. His voice cut through the stillness, chanting words that made even the warriors shift uneasily. The prophecy of fire and iron, an ancient warning etched into obsidian tablets, was being spoken aloud again, after generations of silence. In the plaza below, the eagle and jaguar warriors tightened the leather straps of their armor, their obsidian blades polished until they gleamed like liquid night. Among them stood Tlacaelel, a seasoned jaguar warrior whose scars told the story of countless battles. His gaze was fixed not on the temple, but on the smoke in the distance. He felt it in his chest, like a drumbeat from the underworld. War was coming, greater than any before. The drums began to thunder, summoning the city's people to the ritual square. Women carried baskets of maize and cacao, while children clung to their mothers' robes, wide-eyed. The nobles assembled, their gold jewelry flashing in the morning sun, yet their faces betrayed unease. The air was thick with the mingled smell of burning copal and fear. And then, the omen revealed itself fully. A blood-red streak tore across the sky, as if the heavens themselves had been cut open. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The high priest's voice faltered, and even the emperor, Moctezuma, shifted uneasily upon his throne. Tlacaelel gripped the hilt of his macuahuitl. He had seen many battles, but never had he seen the gods themselves paint the sky with blood. Something vast and terrible was moving toward Tenochtitlan. And deep within the sacred chamber of the temple, a messenger fell to his knees before the emperor. His body battered, his eyes wild with terror, bearing news of an enemy force that no man had ever seen before. The emperor leaned forward, his voice sharp and trembling. "What have you witnessed?" The messenger opened his mouth, but the words died in his throat. The crowd hushed as the messenger's lips trembled. His skin was covered in dust, his cloak torn, as though he had run for days without rest. His eyes darted upward, as if afraid the sky itself might hear him. Finally, his voice broke free, ragged, desperate. "They come from beyond the sea. Their skin is pale as bone, their bodies wrapped in metal. They ride upon beasts taller than men, beasts with hooves like thunder. And their weapons spit fire." A horrified murmur surged through the plaza. Warriors gripped their macuahuitl tighter, as if to anchor themselves to something familiar. Priests crossed their hearts with trembling hands, whispering the names of gods who had not been called in centuries. Moctezuma too sat rigid upon his throne of turquoise and gold, his face unreadable. Yet his fingers dug into the armrests, betraying his unease. "Beasts taller than men," he repeated softly, as if tasting the strangeness of the words. The high priest Tlacaelel stepped forward, his eyes blazing. "It is the prophecy. The gods warned us of invaders clothed in iron. This is no war of men. It is the return of Quetzalcoatl or his shadow." The people wailed, some falling to their knees, others clutching their children. The omen of smoke, the blood in the sky, and now this tale of fire-breathing weapons. It was too much to dismiss. Tlacaelel, standing among the warriors, felt a chill crawl up his spine. He had fought rival cities, crushed rebellious provinces, and bled in the flower wars. But this was different. He could smell destiny in the air, sharp and bitter like burning obsidian. "Enough!" Moctezuma's voice boomed, silencing the crowd. "We will not surrender to fear. Tenochtitlan is the heart of the world, and its people are the chosen of the gods. If these strangers come, we will meet them as warriors, not cowards." The drums pounded again, louder, steadier, as if the city itself demanded courage. Warriors shouted their assent, their voices echoing off the temple walls. Yet in the silence between the drumbeats, Tlacaelel heard the messenger's broken whisper once more. They cannot be killed. I saw our best warriors fall, cut down like maize in the harvest. And as the crowd surged with false bravado, Tlacaelel's heart sank. For the first time in his life, he wondered if courage alone would be enough. Night draped itself over Tenochtitlan like a shroud. The lake's waters glistened black beneath the moon, reflecting the fires that burned across the city's causeways. On the highest balcony of his palace, Emperor Moctezuma II stood alone, the weight of empire pressing upon his shoulders. Behind him, the chamber hummed with debate. Priests argued with generals, their voices sharp as obsidian blades. The strangers are gods, Tlacaelel insisted, his hands clutching the sacred codices. They fulfill the signs: smoke, fire, blood. To raise arms against them is to raise arms against destiny itself. The warlord Tlacaelel slammed his fist against the table, rattling the golden goblets. Gods do not bleed, yet the messenger said their beasts can be pierced, their men cut down. If they can fall, they are mortal, and if mortal, they can die. Tlacaelel listened in silence, his jaw tight. His mind returned again and again to the messenger's whisper. They cannot be killed. He had seen brave warriors stare down jaguars and die without flinching. But this fear was deeper, like poison seeping into the veins of the city. Moctezuma finally turned, his face pale in the firelight. His voice was steady, but every word carried the tremor of uncertainty. If they are gods, we cannot fight them. If they are men, we must. Yet the risk, if I choose wrongly, it will not be my life alone that is lost, it will be the empire. The silence that followed was heavy as stone. The emperor's eyes moved from priest to general, from noble to warrior, searching for certainty and finding none. Finally, he raised his hand. Tomorrow I will meet these strangers. I will offer them gifts, gold, and words of welcome. If they are gods, they will bless us. If they are men, perhaps we will bind them as allies before blades are drawn. The priests exhaled in relief. The generals seethed but bowed. Tlacaelel clenched his fists, fury and dread warring in his chest. To offer tribute before battle was to show weakness. And weakness, he knew, was blood in the water. That night, as the city slept uneasily, Tlacaelel prayed not to the gods of life, but to Huitzilopochtli, Lord of War. He prayed for strength, for clarity, for the courage to face what was coming. And when dawn broke, the lake shimmered with something unnatural. Dozens of floating towers, sails white as bones, moving silently toward the heart of the empire. The people of Tenochtitlan gathered along the causeways, their voices hushed as the floating towers drifted closer. No one had seen such things before. Great wooden beasts with wings of cloth, gliding across the water as though the lake itself obeyed them. From their bellies poured men of strange appearance. Their skin gleamed pale in the sun, their faces covered by beards like tangled vines. They carried sticks that gleamed with metal, and their armor clattered like the shells of giant beetles. But it was not the men that made the crowd recoil. It was the beasts they rode. Massive creatures with eyes like fire, manes flowing, and hooves that thundered upon the stone. Horses, though to the Mexica, they were monsters born of nightmare and prophecy. Mothers clutched their children tighter. Warriors stared, their hearts divided between awe and rage. Moctezuma, robed in shimmering turquoise and crowned with plumes, stepped forward upon the causeway. His face betrayed no fear, though inside his chest his heart pounded like a war drum. Behind him, the nobles carried gifts: necklaces of jade, discs of hammered gold, and baskets of cacao. The leader of the strangers dismounted from his beast. His eyes were sharp, his beard black, and his armor shone with cruel beauty. He moved with the confidence of one who had conquered many lands. His name was Hernán Cortés. Through interpreters, words were exchanged. Moctezuma spoke with dignity, offering the strangers the wealth of Tenochtitlan, claiming the city as the dwelling of gods. Cortés listened, his face unreadable, but his men's eyes glittered with hunger as they beheld the gold. Gifts were placed into foreign hands. The priests chanted, attempting to weave protection into the air. Yet Tlacaelel, standing at the emperor's side, saw the hunger in the stranger's gaze. It was not the look of gods accepting tribute. It was the look of predators who had scented prey. And as the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in fire, Cortez's men raised one of their weapons for demonstration. With a deafening roar, fire erupted, and smoke billowed. A Jaguar warrior standing too close fell screaming, his chest torn open by invisible force. The people shrieked in terror. Some fled, others dropped to their knees, convinced the gods of fire themselves had come. Moctezuma froze. He had offered gifts, gold, and peace. But before him he saw death wrapped in metal. Tlacaelel reached for his macuahuitl, rage boiling inside him. If the emperor would not act, perhaps the warriors must. And Cortez's eyes, cold as obsidian, locked onto Tlacaelel's. Two predators recognizing one another. That night, the city trembled with whispers. The people of Tenochtitlan had seen the fire weapons and the thunder beasts. They had seen a warrior fall without a blade ever touching him. Fear spread through the canals and plazas like smoke, curling into every household. In the emperor's palace, Moctezuma sat alone, his golden ornaments cast aside, his eyes hollow. He could not forget the roar of the weapon, nor the way the stranger's leader looked at him, as though weighing him like a merchant weighs maize. Tlacaelel, the high priest, entered quietly. "Great speaker," he murmured, bowing low. "These men are not gods, they are demons, but demons can be appeased. Give them what they crave, gold, tribute, slaves, and they may pass us by." Moctezuma's lips trembled. "And if they are gods? Then tribute will honor them. Either way, we must not draw their wrath." But when the priest departed, another entered. Tlacaelel, still wearing his jaguar pelt, his eyes blazing in the torchlight. He did not bow. "Great speaker," he said, voice low but fierce. "These men are no gods. Gods do not bleed, but men do. And men who lust for gold are weaker than they appear. Give them nothing. Drive them back into the lake before they infect our city." Moctezuma turned sharply. "You dare command me? I dare speak the truth." Tlacaelel's hand rested on his weapon. "The people already doubt. They saw their brothers fall. If you yield more gold, you will not appear merciful, you will appear afraid. And fear will undo us faster than any weapon of theirs." For a moment, silence stretched between emperor and warrior, broken only by the crackle of torches. Moctezuma's face was carved from stone, unreadable. Finally, he spoke. "Leave me." Tlacaelel obeyed, but as he stepped into the moonlit courtyard, he clenched his fists. He had sworn loyalty to his emperor, but his loyalty to Tenochtitlan burned hotter still. If Moctezuma would not defend the city, someone else must. And in the shadows of the causeways, unseen by the guards, the strangers plotted, their voices hissing in a tongue none of the Mexica could understand. Their eyes gleamed not with reverence, but with hunger. The following day, the strangers were invited into the heart of Tenochtitlan. Moctezuma, still torn between fear and awe, commanded that a grand feast be held in their honor. He believed that hospitality might bind them, that gold and ceremony could soften their hunger. The streets were swept clean, flowers scattered across the causeways. Noble maidens carried garlands of marigold, while musicians struck drums and flutes, filling the air with trembling melodies. The people watched in silence, uneasy, as the strangers marched through the city with their beasts, their armor glinting like jagged suns. At the palace, a banquet was laid out. Steaming platters of roasted turkey, maize tamales wrapped in green leaves, bowls of honeyed chocolate. The foreigners ate greedily, though their leader, Cortez, maintained a cold restraint, speaking little, observing everything. The climax of the feast was the dance of masks. Warriors clad in jaguar pelts and eagle feathers leapt and spun in fierce rhythm, their obsidian blades flashing under torchlight. The performance was meant to honor the gods and impress the guests with the strength of the Mexica. The crowd roared with pride as the warriors stamped the earth like thunder. But the strangers did not cheer. They whispered among themselves, eyes fixed not on the dance, but on the gold jewelry glittering on the performers. Tlacaelel noticed their gaze, and fury burned in his chest. These men were not awed by their culture, their gods, or their warriors. They saw only treasure. When the dance ended, Moctezuma himself rose, his cloak a river of turquoise. He placed a necklace of golden discs around Cortez's neck. "You are welcome in the city of the sun," he said solemnly. "Here you will know peace." Cortez bowed, but Tlacaelel saw the faint curl of a smile at his lips. A smile not of gratitude, but of conquest. That night, after the feast, Tlacaelel walked through the temple courtyards. He found his fellow warriors sharpening their obsidian blades in silence. They, too, had seen the hunger in the stranger's eyes. And then, a runner arrived, breathless, falling to his knees. His words sent a ripple of dread through the warriors. "The strangers have seized one of our granaries. They say it is for their safety." Tlacaelel's hand tightened on his macuahuitl. This was no longer diplomacy. This was invasion. Dawn broke with an uneasy silence. The streets of Tenochtitlan, usually vibrant with merchants and children, were deserted. Smoke still curled from the edges of the granary the strangers had taken, carrying the scent of charred maize into the city. Tlacaelel led a small band of Jaguar warriors toward the granary, moving silently along the canals. Their hearts pounded in time with the drums of war that seemed to echo in their chests. Every shadow seemed alive with danger. When they reached the granary, they saw the strangers, pale, armored, mounted on their thunderous beasts, guarding the treasure. The warriors' eyes widened in horror as they glimpsed the weapons that had already killed their brothers. Sticks of fire that spat death without touch. "We cannot wait," Tlacaelel whispered. "Strike now, or our city will fall piece by piece." The Jaguar warriors nodded, understanding the silent command. They surged forward, obsidian blades flashing in the early sunlight. The strangers reacted with lightning speed. Fire erupted. Warriors screamed as the invisible death struck, cutting down the first wave. Tlacaelel barely dodged a burst, feeling the heat scorch his arm. His eyes, filled with rage, locked onto one of the strangers' horses. With a battle cry that shook his lungs, he leapt forward, striking the mount with all his strength. The beast reared, throwing its rider to the ground. For a moment, hope surged. The Mexica warriors pressed their advantage, moving with the deadly coordination that had made them feared across the lakes. But then came a sound that froze their blood. A deep, guttural roar, louder than any drum. From the far end of the granary, more beasts emerged, larger, more terrifying, their hooves smashing the ground, their eyes blazing with malice. Tlacaelel's heart sank. This was no ordinary skirmish. This was a war unlike any he had known. And above the roar, he heard a voice in his mind. A whisper carried by the wind, almost divine, almost human. "Choose, warrior, the city, or the lives of those you love." The city trembled under the distant pounding of hooves. Smoke from the skirmish at the granary twisted into the sky like black serpents, signaling a danger that could no longer be ignored. Moctezuma convened an emergency council in the great temple. Priests, generals, and nobles crowded into the shadowed chamber, the air thick with incense and fear. Tlacaelel entered last, his jaguar pelt dark against the torchlight, his eyes stormy with anger. "We cannot let them take another granary," he said, voice slicing through murmurs. "They hunger not for peace, they hunger for dominion. If we wait, the city will crumble." Tlacaelel raised a hand, shaking like a reed. "They are gods. They wield fire and death. If we strike, we anger the heavens themselves." Tlacaelel stepped closer to the emperor. "Great speaker, with respect, the heavens do not march on our causeways. Men do, and men who bleed are mortal. We can fight them, but only if we act as one." The generals shifted uncomfortably. One Tlilpatanqui spoke up. "We have numbers, yes, but not their weapons. One burst of that fire, and half our warriors are ashes." Motecuzuma's gaze drifted toward the lake, where the floating towers still waited, silent as death. His hands trembled as he rubbed his forehead. If we attack, we risk annihilation. If we do nothing, we invite destruction. How can I choose? Tlacaelel's eyes burned. Your choice is clear. You will decide the fate of Tenochtitlan. Not tomorrow, not after prayers, but now. Rally the warriors. Let the gods bear witness to our courage, not our fear. For a long moment, the emperor said nothing. The torches flickered, casting long, jagged shadows across the stone walls. Outside, a horn sounded from the lake, low and terrifying. The strangers were moving again, their beasts pawing the ground, their weapons glinting in the sun. And in that moment, Tlacaelel realized that whatever the emperor decided, the first blood had already been spilled, and the city's destiny was already on a knife's edge. Then came a sudden crash. The doors of the council chamber burst open. A scout, panting and wide-eyed, fell to his knees. They are landing at the northern causeway, thousands of them, with beasts. The city's gates will not hold. Tlacaelel ran through the palace corridors, his heart hammering like a war drum. The northern causeway, one of the main entrances to Tenochtitlan, was the city's lifeline. If it fell, the strangers could pour in like water over a broken dam. Outside, the sky burned with the rising sun, reflecting off the lake in molten gold. From the northern horizon, the floating towers glided silently, casting enormous shadows over the causeway. Horses and riders spilled onto the stones, their armor clanking with the rhythm of doom. The city's defenders had been summoned. Eagle warriors and Jaguar warriors lined the walls, their obsidian blades in hand, shields polished and ready. Women and children had been moved to the inner plazas, where priests chanted protective prayers over them. Tlacaelel climbed atop the walls, shouting commands. His voice carried over the growing roar of the strangers. Hold the causeway. Do not let them enter. For Tenochtitlan, for Huitzilopochtli. The first clash came like thunder. Horses reared, throwing riders into the fray. Arrows streaked through the air, striking with deadly precision. The strangers' fire weapons spat flames and smoke, cutting down the Mexico warriors with terrifying speed. The smell of burned leather and flesh filled the morning air. Tlacaelel's Macuahuitl struck, severing an arm from a horseman, but another stranger's weapon erupted in fire inches from his face. He jumped back, the heat scorching his pelt. Around him, friends fell, screaming, and the causeway became a churning battlefield of man and beast. Amid the chaos, Tlacaelel spotted a figure moving deliberately toward him. A stranger mounted on a massive horse, his face hidden beneath a steel helmet. The warrior carried no fear, only cold intent, and in his hand gleamed a metal stick that promised death. Tlacaelel's blood ran cold. He knew that this man was not like the others. He was the leader, the one who commanded their every move. And he had come for him. The two warriors locked eyes, and in that instant, time seemed to slow. The fate of Tenochtitlan rested on the edge of a blade. The sun beat down on the northern causeway, turning the stones into molten mirrors reflecting fire and blood. Tlacaelel stood at the wall, gripping his Macuahuitl so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Around him, the Mexico warriors fought with the precision of jaguars, leaping, striking, vanishing into the chaos. But the strangers pressed forward, their fire sticks roaring like lightning from the sky. The rider Tlacaelel had seen advanced with terrifying calm. His horse thundered, hooves smashing stone, while the warriors' weapons spat death at anyone who dared approach. Tlacaelel's mind raced. One strike, one mistake, and the city's walls would be overrun. He leapt from the wall, landing in the fray with the roar of a jaguar. His blade sang as it struck the first of the enemies, severing an arm and forcing a scream from the rider. But the stranger's fire stick erupted, sending flames licking around Tlacaelel's feet. He rolled aside, catching his breath, and surged forward again. The two warriors collided at the center of the causeway, obsidian and steel clashing with deafening clangs. Sparks flew, mixing with smoke and dust. Tlacaelel's muscles screamed as he parried blow after blow, each strike threatening to end his life instantly. He realized, with grim certainty, that he was facing not a man, but the embodiment of death itself. Above the battle, the city trembled. Arrows flew, beasts reared, and the Mexica defenders shouted in defiance and terror. Tlacaelel's mind flashed back to the messenger's words, "They cannot be killed." Sweat and blood streamed down his face as he ducked under another swing. Then the stranger's horse reared, knocking several warriors aside. Tlacaelel had a choice: pursue the leader and risk leaving the causeway undefended, or stay and fight for the lives of the warriors around him. Time slowed, and the whisper returned, as if carried on the wind itself. "Choose, warrior, the city or your vengeance." Tlacaelel's heart froze. He could feel the weight of the entire empire pressing upon his shoulders. Tlacaelel froze in the center of the causeway, his macuahuitl raised, the heat of battle pressing in from all sides. The stranger's leader loomed before him, unyielding, a figure of steel and death. Around him, warriors fell screaming, Jaguar and eagle pelt torn by fire and steel. The whisper echoed again in his mind, "Choose, the city or your vengeance." His jaw clenched. Every instinct screamed to strike, to end the life of the stranger who had brought destruction to Tenochtitlan. Yet as he looked back over the chaos, he saw the walls beginning to buckle, terrified citizens pressed against the gates, and the city's future teetering on a knife's edge. Tlacaelel made his choice. With a guttural roar, he leapt sideways, intercepting a group of advancing riders aimed at the city gates. His blade flashed, cutting down 2 attackers, and he spun again, deflecting fire and steel from a third. He had chosen the city over personal vengeance. The stranger's leader watched, his eyes cold and calculating. He raised his fire stick again, and Tlacaelel knew that the next moments would decide more than a battle. They would decide the fate of an empire. The Mexica warriors rallied around him, inspired by his defiance. The clash became a hurricane of obsidian and steel, cries of the dying echoing against the walls. Flames licked the causeway, and smoke twisted like serpents through the morning light. And then, from the far end of the city, a horn sounded. A deep, resonant call unlike any drum or trumpet Tlacaelel had ever heard. The sound carried across the lake and into the hearts of men, striking terror even into the strangers. Tlacaelel's eyes widened. It was not a Mexica horn. It was the horn of reinforcements. The enemy had allies approaching, and they were coming faster than anyone could anticipate. The battle was about to escalate far beyond anything Tlacaelel had prepared for, and the city's fate hung by a thread thinner than a spider's web. Smoke and fire twisted across the northern causeway, turning day into a hellish twilight. Just as Tlacaelel had feared, the horn's echo announced a new wave of attackers. Not Mexica, but strangers emerging from the southern lake, smaller in number but equally terrifying. Their armor gleamed in the sunlight, and they rode with disciplined precision, forming lines that cut through the chaos. Tlacaelel's warriors were exhausted, bloodied, and fearful. They looked to him for guidance, and he roared a command, rallying them to hold the causeway at all costs. His blade moved like lightning, a streak of Jaguar fury in the midst of the inferno. But as the battle raged, a deeper betrayal revealed itself. From the city walls, a contingent of Mexica warriors turned aside, abandoning their posts. Rumors whispered through the ranks. Some nobles had struck secret deals with the strangers, hoping to survive by offering the city's gold and granaries. Tlacaelel's heart clenched. To fight the strangers was one thing, but to fight while betrayal festered within the city's own walls was a nightmare beyond imagining. He roared in fury, rallying his closest warriors. "Do not falter. Our people, our city, will not be undone by treachery." The battle turned into a desperate dance of fire and steel. Tlacaelel intercepted a horseman, rolling beneath him and cutting down his mount. Another warrior fell beside him, screaming as a stranger's fire stick turned his chest to ash. The northern causeway was narrowing, and the Mexica forces were pushed to the brink of collapse. Above the chaos, Tlacaelel glimpsed the stranger leader moving again, toward Moctezuma, who had taken refuge on the palace balcony, paralyzed by fear and uncertainty. The emperor was defenseless, the city's fate slipping through his hands. Tlacaelel clenched his jaw. To protect the city, he would have to face the leader alone, and that might cost him everything he had fought for. The palace balcony shook as the sounds of battle surged around it like a living thing. Smoke and ash from the granary fire mingled with the cries of the dying, turning the air thick and suffocating. Moctezuma too clutched the railing, trembling as the stranger leader advanced, horse hooves clattering on stone. Tlacaelel raced through the palace corridors, leaping over fallen guards and debris. His heart pounded not with fear, but with the fury of a jaguar ready to strike. He could not allow the emperor to fall. Without Moctezuma, the city would have no anchor, no hope. Bursting into the balcony, Tlacaelel faced the stranger leader. The warrior's steel gleamed, his eyes cold as obsidian. Between them, the emperor cowered, golden cloak flowing, as if he were a statue in a collapsing temple. "Step aside," Tlacaelel roared. "If you want him, you must go through me." The stranger raised his fire stick, flames licking the air. Tlacaelel spun his macuahuitl, sparks flying as steel met obsidian. The two circled one another like predators, each testing the other's strength and resolve. Around them, the battle raged, the clash of metal, the screams of warriors, and the thunder of hooves echoing against the stone. Tlacaelel struck first, his blade slicing through the air with jaguar precision. The stranger parried, steel ringing against obsidian. Another strike, another clash. Each move was a dance of death, each moment bringing the city closer to collapse. Then came the whisper again, clear in Tlacaelel's mind. "The city or your vengeance. Choose or lose both." Tlacaelel's gaze flicked to the emperor, pale and trembling. His loyalty surged, fierce and unstoppable. He made his choice, not vengeance, the city first. With a roar, he leapt toward the emperor, intercepting another charge from the stranger. The force of his body and weapon threw the horse aside, sending rider and mount crashing to the balcony floor. Tlacaelel's arms ached, his body burned, but Moctezuma was safe, for now. Yet even as he stood victorious in that small moment, a chilling realization struck him. More strangers were advancing from every direction, and this was only the beginning of the siege. The sun had climbed high, turning the city into a furnace of heat, smoke, and blood. From the palace walls, Tlacaelel could see the full scope of the attack. The strangers had spread across the causeways, their beasts trampling barricades, their fire weapons sparking panic among the Mexica warriors. The city's defenders fought with desperation and fury. Eagle and jaguar warriors threw themselves against the invaders, cutting down men and beasts alike. Yet for every enemy that fell, two more seemed to take their place. The northern causeway was a river of chaos. The southern walls shuddered under the weight of assault, and the marketplaces had become battlegrounds of terror. Tlacaelel moved like a shadow through the smoke, his blade a jagged streak of death. He rallied his warriors, inspiring them with raw courage, yet he knew it would not be enough. The strangers' reinforcements were relentless, and betrayal within the city walls had left key positions undefended. Moctezuma too remained on the palace balcony, powerless to intervene. His hands gripped the railings, knuckles white, as he watched the city bleed. Fear gnawed at him, yet he clung to the hope that Tlacaelel's strength could hold back the tide. Then, a new horror appeared. From the southern lake, massive rafts appeared, carrying more strangers and beasts, flanked by jagged metal towers that vomited flame. The Mexica archers fired with all their might, but arrows bounced harmlessly off the metal, sparks raining down onto the defenders below. Tlacaelel's jaw tightened. The city was being surrounded. Escape was impossible. Every strategy, every plan, was collapsing under the relentless march of fire, steel, and death. And as he raised his eyes to the horizon, he saw the leader of the strangers standing atop one of the floating towers, surveying the city with the calm of a predator sizing up its prey. Tlacaelel knew with a sickening certainty that the final assault was about to begin, and that the choice he had made to protect the emperor might demand a sacrifice greater than any he had ever imagined. The city of Tenochtitlan trembled under the roar of hooves and the crackle of fire. Smoke choked the plazas, and the scent of burning maize and flesh filled the air. Tlacaelel stood atop the palace walls, his macuahuitl slick with blood, his jaguar pelt scorched from flames, yet his eyes burned with unyielding resolve. The strangers advanced in perfect formation, their horses trampling barricades, their fire sticks cutting swaths of death through the defenders. Behind them, the river of reinforcements seemed endless, a tide of pale men and beasts hungry for conquest. Moctezuma too, cloaked in gold and turquoise, watched from the balcony. His fear was palpable, but so was his hope. The hope that Tlacaelel and his warriors could hold the city long enough for some miracle, for some turn of fate. Tlacaelel's mind was a storm of strategy and desperation. Every path was perilous. Every choice could mean the death of hundreds. Yet he had made his decision, to defend the city at all costs, even if it meant facing death himself. He roared to the warriors around him, a sound that rose above the chaos. For Tenochtitlan, for Huitzilopochtli, we fight or we die. The Jaguar and Eagle warriors surged forward, their blades striking like lightning, their screams mingling with the roar of horses and the crack of fire sticks. Tlacaelel moved through the battlefield like a phantom, cutting down enemy after enemy, shielding the emperor from the encroaching tide. But the enemy leader was relentless. He came again, atop a massive horse, fire stick roaring. Tlacaelel met him at the city gates, obsidian against steel, jaguar against predator. The clash shook the stones beneath them. Each strike was a battle of wills, each block a test of survival. Finally, with a calculated leap, Tlacaelel disarmed the stranger, sending his weapon clattering across the stones. The leader stumbled, and for a brief moment, the Mexica warriors saw victory within their grasp. Yet the tide of enemies was overwhelming. From every causeway, from every wall, more strangers poured in. Tlacaelel realized the truth with a crushing weight. Tenochtitlan might not survive this day, no matter how fiercely they fought. He turned to Moctezuma. "Great speaker," he shouted over the chaos. "You must live. The city may fall, but the people must endure." The emperor's eyes widened, understanding the sacrifice Tlacaelel was offering. Without hesitation, Tlacaelel plunged into the heart of the enemy ranks, a jaguar among wolves, buying time for the emperor to escape through secret passages to the inner city. The battle raged on, a hurricane of death, fire, and fury. Tlacaelel's figure became a legend on the causeways, striking fear into the strangers even as the city itself began to crumble. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky blood-red, the city held, but at a terrible cost. The Mexica would survive, their empire scarred but not broken, and Tlacaelel's courage would be whispered in songs for generations. A warrior who chose the city over vengeance, life over glory, and whose sacrifice became the heart of Tenochtitlan's enduring legend. The city was safe for now, but the shadow of the strangers loomed ever larger, a reminder that even gods could not always shield mortals from the fury of the world.